I never thought I'd hear the words, "I'm going out to see my lover tonight. You can't stop me," from my own wife. She said it as casually as if she were telling me she was going to buy groceries. I could barely process what I'd just heard. She dropped it like a bomb, then smirked, waiting for a reaction. There was something off about it, her nonchalance mixed with a hint of challenge, like she was daring me to do something drastic. It wasn't our first rough patch, and we'd had our fair share of arguments, but this? This was on a whole new level. There I was, sitting on the couch in our living room, staring at her in disbelief, trying to wrap my head around the boldness of her statement. Maybe I'd misheard. But no, she repeated it, this time with even more amusement in her eyes, like she was enjoying this twisted power play. I did the only thing I could, I laughed. It wasn't the reaction she was expecting. Her smirk faltered, and her eyebrows shot up as if questioning my sanity. But it was an honest laugh, deep and genuine. I mean, here was my wife, looking all dressed up for a man who wasn't me, telling me she was off to see him, and expecting me to, what? Beg her to stay. Start a huge fight. Call her lover and challenge him to some duel. Instead, I leaned back, still chuckling, and said, "All right, have fun." I threw her the car keys like I was sending her out to the mall. The look on her face was priceless, a mix of confusion, annoyance, and maybe even a bit of frustration. She snatched the keys mid-air, clearly irked that I wasn't responding with the fire she wanted. "You're not going to stop me," she scoffed, but I just shrugged, trying to hide the excitement bubbling up inside me. Because here's the thing, I had my own plans brewing. As she sashayed out the door, I sat there, phone in hand, and started setting a series of ridiculous but perfectly calculated steps into motion. First, I called my friend Tom, who also happened to be a realtor. I'd known him since college, and he owed me a favor, a big one. "Tom," I said, "how fast can we sell a house?" There was a pause on the other end, a stunned silence that was quickly broken by a nervous laugh. How fast are we talking?" "Overnight," I replied, half joking, half dead serious. Now, this house wasn't just any house. It was our dream home, 2 stories, the perfect lawn, and a garage filled with her decor ideas that made it seem like a Pinterest catalog had exploded inside. We'd sunk everything into this place, and by we, I mean mostly my money, since I was the one working overtime to pay it off. She'd always loved flaunting the place to her friends, and that's when the realization hit me, this house wasn't just my investment, it was my leverage. Within the hour, Tom had arranged for an appraisal, while I was busy emptying every account we had. Now, she was the type to always leave her finances on autopilot, confident that her sweet words and my blind trust would be enough to keep her in luxury. Not tonight. I was making sure every penny found a new home in my own personal investment account, something she'd never know about. I wasn't done there. As I went from account to account, transferring funds and smiling at the balances, an idea began to take shape. It was risky, probably insane, but so absurd it just might work. The minute she left, it was like I could finally breathe again. I'd been feeling suffocated in this marriage for years, but her blunt betrayal unleashed something in me. Gone were the days of second-guessing myself, of wondering if she still loved me, or what I could do to make things better. I was finally free. And I wasn't about to waste a second of it. Tom called back, sounding more than a little rattled. "Are you serious about this, man? You really want to sell your house? Like, now?" "Dead serious, Tom," I replied. "And I need it done fast. No inspections, no waiting for a buyer to fall in love with the place. I don't care if you sell it to a ghost, just get it done. Name the price, whatever makes it move the quickest." "All right," he replied slowly, still trying to wrap his head around it. "I'll get someone over tonight for a cash appraisal. But, are you really ready for this? What if she comes back, changes her mind?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Tom, let me put it this way, if she comes back, she's not finding anything but empty walls and maybe a note saying, "Good luck with your new life." This is happening. I hung up, feeling a rush of exhilaration. For the first time in years, I was holding all the cards. I pulled out my laptop, scrolled through our accounts, and carefully siphoned off everything I could find. I left just enough so it wouldn't trigger any red flags, she wouldn't notice right away that the money was gone. I moved the funds to an account she knew nothing about, one I'd set up years ago, just in case. With the financials handled, it was time to think about the next step, the house. While Tom worked on the sale, I needed to clear it out. No point in leaving anything behind that held any value. I grabbed a couple of suitcases and started throwing in the essentials, clothes, documents, my laptop, anything that I might need for a new beginning. Then I went to the garage and found a stash of boxes. My wife loved collecting random stuff, paintings, vases, antique furniture. I figured I'd either donate them or, if Tom found a buyer quick enough, leave them as added perks for the new owner. It was close to midnight when I finally sat down to catch my breath, surrounded by half-packed boxes and suitcases, adrenaline still pumping through my veins. I had no idea where I was going or what my next move would be, but that was the thrill of it. I didn't need a plan, I just needed to get away, to sever every tie that held me to her. And honestly, the idea of disappearing, of living somewhere she'd never think to find me, was intoxicating. As I sat there, I remembered the years we'd spent in this house, all the good times, and all the not-so-good ones. I'd been so blind, so devoted, so complacent. She'd relied on that, taken advantage of my loyalty and trust. Well, she was in for the shock of her life when she came home to an empty shell of a house and a bank account with nothing in it but dust. My phone buzzed. It was Tom. "I found a buyer," he said, sounding both stunned and impressed. "They're offering a cash deal. You won't get market price, but it'll be close enough." "Perfect. When can they close?" "They're ready to wire the funds as early as tomorrow morning. You'll have your money by noon." I could barely believe it. Things were moving faster than I'd imagined. I thanked Tom, hung up, and started planning my next steps. Tomorrow, by noon, I'd be a free man, with a fresh start and a full bank account. I didn't know where I was going yet, but that didn't matter. The important part was that I was leaving her behind, with nothing but her ego and a shattered illusion of control. I wrote a quick note, something short, cryptic, just enough to leave her puzzled. "Thanks for the memories. Enjoy your date." I barely got an hour of sleep that night, my mind whirring with everything I still needed to do. But just as I was about to drift off, there was a loud knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. It was nearly 5 a.m., and I wasn't expecting anyone. I froze, my mind immediately racing through possibilities. Had she come back early? Did her date turn sour, or maybe she'd sensed something was off? I took a deep breath and opened the door slowly, only to be met by a man in an ill-fitting suit with a clipboard, a bit disheveled but grinning ear to ear. "Morning. You Mr. Thompson?" he asked, barely giving me time to nod. "Fantastic. I'm here to do a preliminary walkthrough, I'm from Express Home Buy." He said it like it was some TV game show. It took me a moment to process. Tom must have sent this guy for a last-minute appraisal. Yeah, come in. I thought this would happen later." The man waved his clipboard dismissively. "Oh, don't worry about it. We like to get these things rolling early. Time is money, right?" He chuckled, looking around like he was casing the place for hidden treasure. With a suspiciously cheerful spring in his step, he began examining every corner of the house, making comments to himself. Nice molding. Oh, those light fixtures. Classy. Wallpaper choice, though," he clucked his tongue, and I had to resist the urge to roll my eyes. He had an energy about him that was just slightly manic, like he thrived on caffeine and chaos. As he wandered around, taking notes and muttering to himself, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom, buyer wants photos ASAP. Can you do a quick video walkthrough and send it over? I looked over at the appraiser, who was now inspecting the living room carpet with a level of fascination I didn't think was possible. Sure, why not? What's one more absurdity in this whirlwind of a night? I fired up the camera on my phone and started a video tour, narrating the rooms like I was some kind of unlicensed real estate agent. The guy kept popping into the frame with enthusiastic commentary, "Oh, that's a great view of the backyard. Look at those beams." It was almost comical. As I wrapped up the tour, he clapped me on the back and said, "You're going to make someone very happy, my friend." Then, with a flourish, he handed me a business card. "If you ever decide to sell any other properties in the future, look us up." I barely got a chance to reply before he was out the door, clipboard still clutched tightly in his hand. I leaned against the wall, exhaling. It felt like a bizarre fever dream, but everything was falling into place. The house was nearly sold, the accounts were emptied, and by noon, I'd be a free man. But as I stood there, staring at the space he'd just vacated, a wave of panic hit me. What if my wife found out sooner than I expected? What if her date went south and she came home to this scene, finding all the evidence of my great escape? Just as I was about to lose myself in spiraling thoughts, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Tom, "Deal's closed. Money will hit your account in an hour." An hour. Just 60 minutes until freedom was within reach. With only an hour left until the funds transferred, I was nearly free. Everything was ready, I'd packed the essentials, and Tom's buyer had committed. But of course, life wasn't about to let me slip away that easily. I was about to head out for one last coffee at our neighborhood cafe when, out of nowhere, my wife's best friend, Linda, showed up at the door. And Linda was more than just a best friend, she was the neighborhood gossip, the unofficial mayor of the community. If Linda sniffed out even a hint of trouble, my plan was toast. "Hey," she chirped, breezing in like she owned the place. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop by. "Where's Lisa?" She glanced around, immediately noticing the boxes scattered everywhere. "Oh, hey, Linda. She's out for a bit," I stammered, trying to act natural as I shoved the nearest box behind the sofa with my foot. "I was just, cleaning up a bit." "Spring cleaning, you know." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Spring cleaning in the middle of winter?" I shrugged, sweating internally. Linda peered over at one of the half-open boxes and frowned. "Are you two moving?" Well, not moving, per se, just, reorganizing," I replied, forcing a smile. Linda didn't buy it, but she didn't press further. Instead, she pulled out her phone, scrolling through her endless social media notifications, clearly intending to hang around. This was a disaster. If Linda found out, she'd text Lisa in an instant. I had to get her out of the house without arousing suspicion, but every subtle hint I dropped only seemed to make her settle in more comfortably. Finally, in a stroke of desperate genius, I mentioned there was a sale on at her favorite boutique across town. Her eyes lit up, and she finally made her exit. Crisis averted, at least for now. I watched her leave, letting out a sigh of relief. Now it was just a waiting game. With Linda gone and only a few minutes left on the clock, I prepared to leave. I'd leave the keys in the mailbox for the realtor, who promised the buyer would pick them up that afternoon. My hands shook with excitement as I loaded my last suitcase into the car, the thrill of freedom so close I could taste it. But just as I was about to close the door, I heard a car pull up outside. It was Lisa's car. My heart pounded, she wasn't supposed to be back yet. I quickly darted behind the curtains, watching her step out of the car with an unreadable expression on her face. This was it. I had to leave now or lose my chance. My pulse quickened as she came up the walkway, her eyes narrowing at the sight of the piled boxes. I grabbed my keys, mentally preparing for a hasty getaway, when the front door swung open and she caught sight of me. "What's going on?" she demanded, glancing from the packed bags to my guilty expression. My mind raced for an excuse, but nothing came out. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I decided there was no point in hiding it anymore. "You know what, Lisa? I know about everything. The other guy, your little plans. I figured if you were ready to run off, then so am I. I'm selling the house. In fact, the deal's already closed." She blinked, stunned, as my words sank in. You're leaving. And you sold the house." I nodded, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it regret? Anger? I couldn't tell. But before I could read too much into it, she laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the emptying house. "Fine, then. Good riddance," she spat, grabbing her keys and heading back out the door without another word. I watched her leave, feeling a strange mixture of victory and sadness. But it didn't matter. In a few hours, I'd be a free man. With Lisa gone, I had everything I needed to make a clean getaway. The money hit my account like clockwork, and I quickly transferred it all to a secluded, secure fund. Then I left the keys in the mailbox as planned, jumped into my car, and headed out of town, driving into the sunrise with nothing but open road ahead of me. As I drove, I couldn't help but feel a surge of exhilaration. I was free from Lisa, free from the debt, the stress, the lies. It was like a weight had lifted off my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. The next day, I reached a small coastal town, where nobody knew my name. I checked into a modest hotel under a pseudonym, feeling like a character in one of those spy novels I used to read. My phone was buzzing with missed calls from friends, but I ignored them all. I was starting fresh, and I didn't need any reminders of my old life. To blend in, I took on an alias, rented a small, cozy apartment, and even found a job at a local bookstore. Nobody here cared about my past, they just saw me as the quiet guy with a mysterious backstory, and I liked it that way. The coastal town had its charm, with quaint little cafes, a lively fishing port, and streets so narrow you could nearly touch both walls. I rented a small, nondescript apartment with a view of the ocean and started rebuilding my life from scratch. I was now Ben Winters, a quiet, introspective guy from the Midwest with a love of books and a mysterious past. Every morning, I'd grab a coffee from the corner cafe and sit on the pier, watching boats bob along the water as the salty breeze rolled in. People left me alone, and I liked it that way. I'd gotten a job at a local bookstore, where I could lose myself in stories and hide in plain sight. To my neighbors, I was just another anonymous face, an unknown with no family or drama trailing behind him. But some nights, when the waves crashed against the shore, a pang of paranoia would hit. I'd wonder if someone had recognized me or if I'd hear Lisa's angry voice from around the corner. There were always questions I couldn't fully quiet, even in paradise. One night, just as I was drifting off to sleep in my new life, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The number was unfamiliar, and instinctively, I ignored it. But then, a voicemail notification popped up, and curiosity got the best of me. I pressed play, expecting it to be a wrong number or spam. Instead, I heard a familiar voice that sent a chill down my spine. Well, Mr. Winters, you thought you could just disappear? Think again. It was Linda. My stomach dropped. How in the world had she found me? I replayed the message, trying to pick apart every syllable, every nuance. There was no doubt in her voice, she knew exactly where I was. But how? My name, my location. I'd taken every precaution. And yet, here she was, a shadow from my past, finding her way into my new life. I felt a mix of dread and anger. I'd come so far, reinvented everything, only to be tracked down by the neighborhood gossip queen. I knew she wouldn't just stop at calling. Linda was nothing if not persistent, and if she knew I had money, she'd come sniffing around for her cut. I tried to ignore her call, hoping it was a bluff, but the next morning, I found a letter slid under my door. It was in her handwriting, laced with that same smarmy cheerfulness she'd always had back in our old neighborhood. "Dear Ben," it began mockingly, "did you really think you could vanish without me noticing? Funny enough, Lisa came to me the day she found out you disappeared. She looked pathetic, but that's beside the point. I'm sure you wouldn't want your new friends here knowing about the real you, right?" She went on to demand a small monthly donation in exchange for her silence. She wanted $2,000 a month, wired directly to her account. If I failed to pay, she'd not only alert Lisa to my location but would also make sure every last person in my new life knew my sordid history. And she signed it off with, "Looking forward to hearing from you, Ben. I'd hate to spoil this for you." I clenched my fists, furious. I'd left everything behind, lost the person I was to become this new man, only to have it threatened by Linda of all people. But I wasn't about to fold under her demands. I needed a plan to make her regret ever tracking me down. If Linda wanted to play dirty, then I'd make sure she found herself in a game she couldn't win. I spent the next few days laying low, plotting my next move. I knew she wasn't after money, she craved control and validation. But I could play along, give her just enough to keep her at bay. I texted her, agreeing to a trial payment and hinting that I'd be willing to negotiate, just to buy time. Every day, I'd send her small transfers from a decoy bank account, an account I'd filled with just enough funds to keep her thinking I was cooperating. Each message I sent was carefully calculated, each payment a breadcrumb to keep her at a distance. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator to dig into Linda's past, and the results were deliciously useful. She had a mountain of unpaid debts, overdue bills, and was fighting multiple legal issues. I now had enough dirt on her to expose her to her family, her friends, and her precious reputation. The trap was set. The next time Linda called, I was ready. I told her I'd wire over a significant amount, enough to pay off a big portion of her debts, which I knew she was desperate to clear. But I added a twist, she'd have to pick it up in person. She hesitated, but greed got the better of her, and she agreed. I chose a cafe on the edge of town, public enough to keep things safe, but quiet enough to avoid any scene. When she arrived, she had that smug look on her face, a confidence that said she'd won. But as we sat down, I leaned forward, pulling out the thick file of her debts, her collection notices, and her court summonses. "Linda," I said calmly, "if you ever contact me again, this will go to every person in our old neighborhood, and maybe even the press. I have enough on you to ensure that even Lisa wouldn't want you around." Her eyes narrowed, her face going pale. She tried to argue, to bluster, but she knew the game was over. "This isn't over," she hissed, trying to save face. "Oh, I think it is," I replied, my voice firm. "Leave, and don't come back." She stormed out of the cafe, defeated. As I watched her go, I felt a surge of satisfaction. I'd won, and there was no way she'd come after me again. After that confrontation, I slipped fully into my new life. Every morning felt like a fresh start, free from the drama, the lies, and the threats. My days were simple, yet full of small joys I hadn't felt in years. I'd read on the beach, explore the little nooks of the town, and start to connect with the locals in a way I never could back home. I made friends with the people who worked at the nearby shops, chatted with old fishermen on the pier, and even started taking classes in painting. The old fears faded, replaced by a peace I hadn't realized I was missing. I never looked back. Linda's shadow was gone, and so was the man I'd once been. I was free. Months passed, and my life settled into a gentle rhythm. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The ghosts of my past were left behind, replaced by a future I'd carved out for myself. The town had become home, a place where no one knew my secrets, and where I didn't need to look over my shoulder. One evening, As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that I'd found what I'd been searching for all along. Not revenge, not escape, but peace. I was finally free, finally alive. And as the waves lapped at the shore, I knew that the past would never catch up to me again.